Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's me and it's Nate. Nate, how are things in the land of Oz over there?
Look, okay, so it's kind of a shit summer right now. It's the weather is pretty cold and just generally not good. It's supposed to get a little bit warmer later in the week, I think, but we had this glorious period for about 15 days and now it's back to being pretty cold again. And everyone's complaining about it because this is actually abnormal for British summer. So the rest of the world is really hot, apparently, the rest of the Northern Hemisphere. And for some reason, the British Isles are very cold, or mild would be the correct term. But like when it's summer and it's 50 fucking degrees, like that just seems insane. 50 Fahrenheit, of course.
So nature is healing, is what you're telling me. Is the British people are once again unhappy with their plight.
Yeah. We are in our natural state. So we've got a huge problem with the Delta variant of COVID. There's a lot of dumb shit going on, but the government, being by and for landlords, is seeing fit to eliminate all restrictions to include any requirements to self-isolate, especially for kids, because the whole point here is they want all kids to get it. Flat out. I mean, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but basically they decided they were going to do herd immunity, and then they realized that was politically a little bit dangerous because it killed so many people. And now, obviously, with vaccines and stuff, a lot of people are vaccinated, but most adults of working age are not fully vaccinated yet. And we're in the situation where they're just saying fuck it. They're kind of going the America route, maybe 9 months after America did it. But America has vaccinated far more people. So who knows what's going to happen?
We've jabbed a lot of people. Although my state, Missouri, is it's not doing well. We're like,
I've heard it's quite poor, isn't it?
Yeah, we're like 50th in the state, or 50th in the country. All of our all of our hospitals in St. Louis are being filled up with people from the southwest of Missouri, where they down in Ranch in Missouri, but also down where they do not do the whole vaccine thing, which is crazy because I had to drive to southern Missouri to get vaccines because our brilliant governor decided that vaccine distribution in the state should just be distributed equally among everywhere, as if the people of Kennett, Missouri, down in the boot heel, were going to all rush out to get vaccines like the people of St. Louis. But, that's fine. It's fine. I went down and I got their vaccines because they didn't want it. And now maybe the guy who carries a Beretta into a Walmart is, coughing his lungs up. Who knows? I hope he's not. I hope he's doing okay. I hope they're all doing okay, but they're not. So I can only do so much for them. I can only do so much for my fellow statesmen, much like, when you talk about England. A lot of times I hear you talk about England, about being mad at everybody there who's being so stupid, and I just see, like you said, England is large Indiana. It's really large. It's just large Midwest. It's just full of a lot of dumb people who are just like, I don't know why you're doing this other than you're being incredibly selfish.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is interesting about it, too, is that the vaccine rates overall are, it's sort of the opposite of the U.S., in that if you look at the rates of adults or people eligible for vaccines, how percentages are vaccinated, if you go into the leafy Tory suburbs, it's 80 or 90%. Whereas in cities, particularly in the poorer parts of cities, it's much lower. And the government, of course, is going to try to tell you that, well, brown people don't want to take vaccines. That's not the case. It's that it's taking fucking forever to get them. It's really, it's much harder to get them in densely populated areas than it is if you live in the suburbs. And, the issue that we're facing, I think, is, obviously, people who get it after one dose, there is a significant reduction from what I can tell in the severity of symptoms and the percentages of people who are being hospitalized and in intensive care and such. Similarly with 2 shots, people are getting it, but the symptoms, from what I can tell from a lot of people, are not as severe as regularly. And obviously the death toll, while it is increasing and while cases are going up massively, hospitalizations are not going up as, commensurate the way that they were in the previous waves. The issue is obviously that it's not the same as the flu. And if it mutates in a way that completely or, more successfully defeats the vaccine, then you're back in a really serious problem. and their decision is to do nothing because commercial landlords want everyone back in the office so they can make more money on rent. And that's who dictates government policy. They have to make concessions for, wall-eyed racists, but also it's commercial landlords. I mean, ultimately that's what and to some extent private landlord or residential landlords as well.
I'm starting to get the feeling, Nate, that you and me aren't really given that much of a shit about as compared to people who give money to politicians.
Well, yeah, and also let's be perfectly honest, the boomers have all gotten vaccinated now. So if they were eligible at all, as long as they didn't have medical conditions that prevented them from getting vaccinated, the boomers have been vaccinated. So now all of the fruits of society have to be delivered to them. And if young people die, and if the virus mutates and kills more people, it doesn't matter. The boomers have always gotten theirs, and now they are getting theirs again. So if that seems like, vulgar and reductive, well, I'm sorry, I don't fucking care. At this point, you see this play out over and over and over again, and it's like, well, much like our discussion of the U.S. war in Afghanistan, our take on this show has primarily been, even if you were a supporter of it, unless you're a complete moron and unwilling to engage with reality, you have to at least acknowledge that we have tried everything that we were promised would work and nothing worked. And so either stop, i.e. do something different by stopping and leaving, or do the same thing over and over again because you're fucking insane. And I think the same is true with regard to how boomers as a group, and that's not everyone, I realize it's not everyone, I get that, I understand that.
Canceled for canceling the boomers. But
in Britain, the level of Tory boomer psycho is like 9 out of 10. And that's borne out in every statistical sample taken. So there are 1 in 10 English boomers who are cool. But in terms of what they believe, what they want, what their priorities are, what they want to see done, how they want this country to function, 90% of them are fucking psychotic. And everything, basically, as long as it benefits them financially, or even if it doesn't, so long as it causes pain to young people and immigrants, they are absolutely fine with it. They are vociferous supporters of it.
Look, and those young people just need to keep calm and carry on, is what I'm told.
Have we ever talked about the whole origins of keep calm and carry on this show? I feel like we have, that it's fake, that it wasn't actually used because the whatever department under the wartime government was like, oh yeah, we did test audiences of this messaging, and they were like, this is condescending, it makes me hate you. And so they're like, yeah, fuck this poster, and they fucking buried it. But then it got found, and now people have created a fantasy version of England in which it's emblematic of anything. But yeah, man, I mean, the situation's not great here. England's doing well in the Euros tournament. I think the next match is coming up shortly. They are into the semifinals, I believe. So if they win this next one, then they'll be in the finals. England is actually doing better than people expected. So that's cool. I don't really follow soccer or, European football. I think that I have in the past, but I think that if I started watching now, invariably I would jinx it. So I'm just not gonna. I'm gonna let the English have their thing, and I will not get involved. I won't comment. I won't pretend that I really understand the game much more than the basic surface level. I remember the only time in my life, and I've ever been like a really devoted football fan, was soccer fan. Obviously, I'm not trying to be pretentious here. I'm just used to saying football. This is what people say here.
Playing the footy, I got you.
Yeah, Roger. I got really bad food poisoning in the summer of 2006 and was living on my own in Bloomington, Indiana. So I really couldn't do anything, and no one really could take care of me and shit. So I had to go. I was able to go to the grocery store very challengingly and pick up groceries. And then I had these big ass bean bags and like a really small old TV, like square cathode ray tube TV back in the olden days. And I was fucking laid out, and I just lived on that stupid bean bag, basically not moving, watching whatever was on TV. And TV was just so boring because I had like a very, the sort of like semi on campus fucking cable connection. But they were showing the World Cup. So I watched a bunch of World Cup matches, even like the kind of, not particularly interesting ones in the early stages, just because I had nothing else to do. And I don't know, I enjoyed it. It's exciting. It's fun. to me, it's not really something that I feel like I'm qualified to talk about. So if they get something and England does well and maybe they win, that'd be amazing. Great for them. But I'm not going to pretend that all of a sudden I'm like, let's go Lion, let's go you British Lions or whatever, singing fucking It's Coming Home or Three Lions on a shirt or, I will sing Love's Got the World in Motion because New Order's football song from 1990 is a fucking jam. That song's incredible. But I'm not going to pretend that like, for one of the authors of It's Coming Home or Three Lions or whatever is a complete piece of shit. So that would ruin it for me if it were a good song, but it's not a good song.
You should put, since you're controlling the soundboard on this recording, you should put the, what is it, the Strong Britain, Great Britain, sung by children song, the fascism song that just came out for England.
Yeah.
That
exactly.
That should be the English. Just a bunch of kids with like the cross flag painted on their cheek, just like completely giving up on everything except for England, and then just singing about how fascist they are.
Yeah, I mean, they're passing a law that basically makes it a crime to assist migrants in any way seeking asylum, even if you're not doing it for financial gain. They're trying to make it easier to deport people and make it impossible to appeal stuff. Like it's all like they just passed a law that criminalizes protest. That basically, if the police deem your protest to be a nuisance, it can be invalidated and you can face up to 10 years in prison for it. So like. They're doing the old fascism shit. Don't get me wrong. Like it's happening day in and day out. And I don't know. It just to round out my England chat. The thing that I would say is that American liberals are credulous morons, but they have nothing on their British counterparts. And I'm specifically speaking about Gen Xers because they are some of the dumbest people in politics in general. And I think the reason for that is the boomers had everything, obviously, from birth because the entire European welfare state was created for them. But the Gen Xers had the critical problem that the Cold War ended and the Berlin Wall came down and, the end of communism happened in Europe around their sort of coming of age politically and, into the workforce. And so they are so dead set on the idea that the world that existed, let's say from 1989 to you could say maybe 1990 or 1989 to however you want to define it, you could say to 2001. I would say either to 2001 or certainly to 2008. But what you're effectively looking at is people who cannot conceive of anything besides, neoliberal capitalism being the way. And it's like they go into, error does not compute mode when confronted with anything that would, counter indicate that this is the only way to go. And in Britain, you also have to factor in the class system and the fact that if you're going to be a media commentator, you're going to be of that class of just, completely inbred and sheltered from all reality moron. So you take that and compound the Gen X brain disease. And you've got a pretty bad situation across the board. So the level of ability to comprehend what is happening in this country is just so stunted. And I mean, I'm grateful that I just don't watch TV news. But in periodically when I go into like a restaurant to get takeaway or like I'm in a store or something and they're showing TV, there's just the dumb moronic shit you hear coming out of people's mouths. You're like, you guys have no idea what's fucking coming. You have no idea what's happening. You have basically hypnotized yourself like a fucking snake with Keep Calm and Carry On in the 2012 Olympic ceremony opening. That like, there's no point in me even talking to any of you. Like it's just I maybe that means I'm black pilled. Maybe that means I'm some other stupid form of pilled, whatever you want to call it. But you know what I like these days, man. I'm just producing some podcasts, doing a lot of cooking, watching some trash American TV. I'm watching the series Godfather of Harlem right now with Forrest Whitaker. And I'm just turning my brain off. I'm going to become unproblematic by having no brain. And it's all good, but you know what?
Oh, you'll finally be a part of the Labor Party.
No, fuck those guys. But I will say unfortunately, this is not just a dad chat, unproblematic, achieving himbo status podcast. However, there is some crossover with the concept of, let's call it a problematic himbo. And that is every now and again, a story emerges in the military of someone who is just cleaning up sexually in a very bad way. We'll call it that. using the cover of being in the military and, being a decently in shape guy who, has the high sex power job of, being an army officer or military officer in some cool guy capacity, and it being used for absolute evil, like unlawful evil, extreme evil. So you found a piece.
Who did I ever? So if you are a fan of the show, you will remember us talking, me specifically, so much about a representative from California named Duncan Hunter. One of my absolute favorite people. He was like the first person to come out for Trump back in 2015.
The first man to vape on the floor of Congress.
Yeah, and he's like one of the very few people. Like, he fucked up so much. Like, you can be a senator or a representative and you can be a fuck up. Like, Matt Gaetz probably isn't going to have anything bad happen to him because he fucked up, but like, he fucked up by buying prostitutes that were questionably aged. He didn't fuck up constantly over and over for, multiple decades like Duncan Hunter did. At a certain point, you're just like, dude, you use campaign funds to buy airline tickets for rabbits. Like, you understand that you're an insane person, right? Like, these are all things Duncan Hunter did. Duncan Hunter also had hoes in every area code, as Ludacris has said it. So this man, military veteran all over the place, representative of California, vaping, spending money on Steam gift cards and airplane seats for rabbits, threw his wife under the bus when all of it came crashing down on him. All these things happened over about a period of about 10 years or so before he was finally and eventually put in jail and then pardoned by Donald Trump, because we live in a hell world. So, that's the comedy of the elected officials. But some people in the military want to do that without being a politician, I guess, without all the other bullshit. Some dudes just like to fuck, and that is Lieutenant Colonel Kane Mancer, a man who just wants to fucking lay some pipe all the time, and I don't know what it is, Nate. Like, if I just wanted to bone random women, I wouldn't have gotten married, right? Like, if I wanted to continuously, but I guess at a certain age, you have to like be ready to settle down. So you have to settle down with multiple women, like Lieutenant Colonel here. But we'll see.
So one thing I think people need to understand, and our civilian audience will probably be aware of this, perhaps, but if not, let me just give you a quick primer on this. In the United States military, Law and Order voice, in the United States military, if you are married, adultery is against the law. You will be punished if it can be proven that you had a sexual encounter with someone who is not your spouse.
If you are married.
Now, there are numerous ways in which sexual activity can be criminalized or penalized in the military. There are two big things in the military that you hear about quite often. One is adultery, and the other is fraternization. Fraternization would be when you have a relationship with someone who is directly in your chain of command, whereas adultery would be any, sort of biblical terms, anyone who's not your spouse. Both are punishable. Now, the Army, in my experience, tends to look the other way with fraternization, so long as it's not really egregious or like completely undeniable. You have a sort of don't ask, don't tell about fraternization. Whereas adultery, it really depends on where you're at, but it's absolutely like, if you are found out, then, and it gets reported, they basically have to do something about it. You effectively have don't ask, don't tell for both fraternization and adultery, but there are obviously a lot of people who will come down super hard on you about it. Now, I absolutely understand the ban on fraternization, because given what the military is and does, but I do think that people are weird Puritans about it. But to me, it's not hard to distinguish between direct chain of command and like in the same company or in the same battalion. It really depends on how it's enforced. But adultery, I think, it's really stupid and very archaic, but the military absolutely does enforce it. So that is the pretext to this story. You have to understand that just the stuff that people would be like, wow, that's shady and fucking gross in terms of just bad relationship behavior, but not illegal in the civilian world, is technically illegal in the military and punishable. And I have seen people punished for it to a great extent.
There's a lot of ways in which, like, I've seen fraternization in the military that nobody gave a shit about. Like when I was deployed, our admin E7 was hooking up with one of our lieutenants, and you know what? They're married with a kid now, so seems to be fine. That was 10 years ago.
I knew people similar thing. I mean, I would say officers and senior NCOs that oftentimes gets looked at slightly less strictly, although it really depends on your chain of command, because it all falls on your commander, and I ultimately would be both your battalion commander, your brigade commander, but there's a certain level of discretion required, and people don't always really care that much. And I think my experience is in the Guard and Reserves, it's probably less strict, but I've also seen people effectively drummed out of the military for it. Also, we would be remiss if we did not stipulate that this is also really dependent on whether you are heterosexual or not heterosexual, in the sense that, in my experience, now I was in the Army, the tail end of my military career was when Don't Ask, Don't Tell had been repealed, and you could, in fact, be openly gay in the military. However, my impression was that fraternization stuff, they came down way harder on people if they were in a gay relationship versus in a straight relationship. So that's a little bit of background. Now I'm going to read this story, and I hope you guys all listen intently about what we would describe as officers behaving badly. All right, the headline: the Army is investigating a married officer accused of faking deployments and awards amid affairs with several women.
The real problem here is that he stole valor.
That's probably the reason why he got on the real shit dick's radar.
When this goes around, everybody's going to get real mad because this guy pretended to have a silver star when he didn't have one.
Yeah, exactly. All right. An Army lieutenant colonel is under investigation after reportedly spinning an insane web of lies over several years in order to carry out affairs with several women. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Kane Mancer, a civil affairs officer based at Joint Base Langley, Eustis, Virginia, has had, quote, serious long-term relationships, unquote, with at least 6 other women over the last 5 years, while still married to his wife of 18 years, according to a Daily Beast report. The investigation was first reported by Army Times. Throughout the relationships, Mancer reportedly lied about being on deployment, going so far as to provide at least one woman with deployment papers that the Daily Beast said appear to be fake, and receiving the Silver Star. The Daily Beast reported Mancer deployed to Afghanistan in 2011 and 2012, but has not been overseas since 2014 and has never received the Silver Star. Mancer also reportedly rented a townhouse for one woman, Chelsea Kernut, while he was living on base and she was pregnant with their child, went on trips with another woman he was engaged to, and even met the women's parents. He reportedly told women he was divorced from his wife at the time, whom he was very much still married to and had 3 children with, and said one of those 3 children, his daughter, had died. Quote, he's got this playbook, one woman who was engaged to Mancer in 2017 told the Daily Beast. Quote, he tells these lies about his dead children, about his post-traumatic stress disorder, his deployments, and all these horrible things he's had to do. He creates all these imaginary traumas to cloak his lies in, unquote. In 2019, the crime of adultery under the Uniform Code of Military Justice was rebranded as extramarital sexual conduct. The maximum punishment is a dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of pay, and up to a year of confinement, that is, prison within the military. Lesser punishments include administrative separations or court-martial with reduction of rank, lesser time in confinement, and punitive action. Sharon Mulligan, a spokesperson for the Center for Initial Military Training at Joint Base Langley Eustis, told Army Times that the Army, quote, is aware of and investigating these allegations against Lieutenant Colonel Mancer, unquote. The Daily Beast reported that Mancer has also been suspended amid the investigation. The Army did not respond to a request for comment from Task and Purpose. Mancer's bizarre alternate reality came to light after Kernut, who he was dating and expecting a child with, went looking for him in June after not hearing from him for days. The last communication they had was when Kernut called him to tell him she was having contractions. He told her not to bother him at work, the Daily Beast reported, and didn't respond to dozens of text messages and calls in the hours afterward. According to the Daily Beast, Kernut then called joint support staff at Joint Base Langley Eustis and was connected with a sergeant major who called Kernut by the name she thought belonged to Mancer's ex-wife. The sergeant major informed Kernut that Mancer was on leave, so she called the woman she believed to be Mancer's former wife. Quote, I was like, listen, I know you probably don't like me because I'm the new person in his life, but I'm calling you out of desperation because I haven't been able to find Kane, Kernut told the Daily Beast. And she goes, Chelsea, we're still married, unquote.
Just this is the Lifetime original movie, setting here of calling in. I can't find my husband. I'm having contractions. What do? I'll call the family readiness group, and then you've got to play the, like, this woman is pregnant and having contractions, and now just like, look, I don't know where's your ex-husband? Where's the father of my child? And then just like, I have no idea what you. Lieutenant Colonel Mancer died 10 years ago. Kind of.
This is a Lifetime original movie called Multidimensional Jody. I'm my own Jody. Mancer and his wife, who is unnamed in the Beast report, have been married for almost 18 years, according to the Daily Beast. She moved back to Illinois last year to, quote, give him some space, unquote, while they were having marital issues. She was planning to move back to Virginia in January when she got a phone call from another woman telling her she was engaged to him. When Kernot went looking for Mancer, she reportedly found him at his parents' house with a woman identified as Jessica, who was engaged to Mancer in 2017. It was then that Mancer's secret life began unraveling. Kernot, Mancer's wife, and Jessica began working together to untangle all of Mancer's lies, according to the Daily Beast report, finding that he was apparently having serious relationships with at least 4 other women over the last 5 years, and that he, quote, had a habit of dating army subordinates and widows of men who died in combat, women who'd be too embarrassed to say anything about it, or whose careers would be ruined if they did it, unquote.
Yeah, that really takes away from the whole, like, oh, this is kind of funny, and then you're just, oh, he's a huge dick.
Yeah, I mean, it starts being very obvious that this is just an insane amount of manipulation.
He's a psychopath, right? He's psychopathic just to get his dick wet. Yeah,
exactly. Kernot posted an old video on Instagram on June 23 showing her and Mancer cutting into a cake to reveal the gender of their baby. Kernot said in the post that when the truth about Mancer came to light, her friends, quote, confronted me and told me they knew something was really off, but they didn't want to make accusations, unquote. Watching my gender reveal now versus then, all I see is a tainted memory, she said. It disgusts me seeing him act the way he did, knowing it was all just a facade.
And this is why we need to ban gender reveals.
Yes. Now, here's the thing, right? One of the issues that I think is important here, my big takeaway off the bat, beyond the conclusion that you came to right away, Francis, which is that it's both funny in principle and horrendous in practice because of how much this guy is clearly manipulating women who are in vulnerable positions. Maybe you heard my voice slowing down as I read the paragraphs about the whole dating, widows of people who died in combat or people whose careers would be compromised. Much like, it's funny. One of the reasons why, beyond your, psychopath, Puritan disgust, one of the reasons why gay people and, what you might describe as non-explicitly heterosexual people were banned from the military and from other government service jobs was this argument that they were vulnerable to blackmail. Now, this is bullshit, but of course the conditions of being forced into secrecy did in fact create a perfect opportunity for these people to be blackmailed. Similarly, one of the things that I find really weird about the military's fixation on adultery is that in so doing, it creates environments in which people are unable to come forward because of abuse or, because of any kind of wrongful or, aggressive or violent behavior or anything along those lines, this kind of deception and manipulation and etc. Because by doing so, they are potentially risking their careers. Now, I've talked about this a little bit on the show before, perhaps, but one of my roommates when I was in brand new infantry training as a 23-year-old lieutenant overheard a conversation I was having on the phone with a friend of mine, and who's a gay friend of mine, and we were relatively frank, just talking about relationship stuff. It wasn't like fucking phone sex, but it was just me talking with him, and confronted me about it because he was extremely homophobic, and then basically assaulted me in the middle of the night one night. Like, he woke me up because he was mad about something and then jumped into my bed and started pummeling me. And, I sort of fought him off and we talked about it. But the dude owned many guns that he was illegally storing in our place because you weren't supposed to, if you're living on post, you're not supposed to have guns in your quarters. They're supposed to be in your unit's arms room. And my man had fucking quite a few, I think 3 or 4 Glock pistols in cases in his room, with ammo and stuff. So I was obviously like, this guy's going to freak out and potentially fucking shoot me. And there's nothing I could do about it. Now I could dime him out for having the guns, but that seemed like it would be an invitation to get killed. And if I went to my unit or I went to the MPs about, hey, this guy fucking assaulted me and choked me and threatened me and shit. And I have to reiterate this, like, imagine getting up to get out of bed to be like, dude, what are you doing in my room? Getting punched in the face, thrown into bed and choked and punched by somebody who was really drunk and really aggressive. Kind of takes you by surprise at 3 a.m. Now,
it's also very strange that you stopped and had a conversation with him afterwards.
Well, it was basically I fought him off and I closed the door and locked it. And then the next morning, as soon as I woke up, I went and I was like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? And he was just sort of like, I'm sorry, I was blackout. I don't really remember anything. And like, but obviously he then moved out a few days later. And like, if I remember correctly, he failed out of Ranger School because he failed Land Nav. He apologized to me years later. It's funny because I remember doing Land Nav with him in iBolic, and he sucked at it and was like, because he was prior service, he was like really aggressively like, no, I know what I'm doing, and he kept getting fucking lost. And I was just like, bro, like, what are you doing? This is wrong. And sure enough, got lost. And then he failed out of Land Nav in Ranger School. So be it. He did email me on AKO a few years later and apologize, and I was like, yeah, man, I accept your apology. Like, bygones be bygones and shit. Like it's one of those things where it's like you're not going to do about it. And what he basically told me was he was like, I had some experiences in deployment that really made me question, how much I think I know about things, and I apologize for what I did. And I was like, yeah, I'll let it rest. But the point I'm trying to make about this is not. It's more that me personally, I was in the situation where I couldn't really do anything about it. If this guy had wanted to report me and get me kicked out of the military, he could have. Now, I could have probably fired back with the assault allegations and the fact that like our neighbors knew he had like harassed them while drunk once. So, maybe it could have backfired. But if I was worried for my life, if I seriously was like, I think this guy's going to try and fucking kill me, I would have to have explained the context of what happened, which would have effectively fallen under many people who are old heads from the Army. Remember, D8AT training. SAM, statements, acts, and marriage. Those are the 3 conditions by which you can be formally outed and thereby fall under the Army's, at the time, what they called homosexual conduct policy. Now, what that means is I would have had to have incriminated myself, and that would have just thus exploded my Army career, before it even really began. Now, at the time, like, I wanted to be an Army officer. I thought I was doing something that I believed in, and obviously, like, in retrospect, well, the Army fucking sucks, and I learned the hard way. But you got to realize, as a brand new, like, been in the Army for 2 months, lieutenant, what an impossible situation this was putting me in. And the thing that I would say about this is that when I look at stuff like adultery and the way the military enforces it, now, I'm not saying that it's great to be like, hell yeah, let's condone people, fucking around on their spouses and stuff. I think that like it's absolutely fair if you have not negotiated something with your spouse in advance, if you are not both consensually agreed upon having an open relationship, it's pretty fucked up to cheat on them. I think it's fair to say that. But when you're in a situation where people cannot come forward about stuff because it will materially affect them in the sense that they will lose their jobs, or they will get demoted, or they'll not get promoted, like you might blow up a career and thus not be able to retire and get a pension when you're old enough and far enough along in the military that you will have a very hard time adjusting to the civilian world and getting back to that level of financial security. So your options are, be blackmailed or be abused or be manipulated or whatever, but you can't come forward about it because you will be punished. I mean, obviously they won't, it's not like mandatory that they will punish you, but in my experience, most people who will be in a position to make that choice as to whether or not they want to prosecute you are weird fucking nerds and huge cops and love policing other people's bedrooms. So you kind of have to, you take your chances with it. It creates a situation in which abuse is allowed to happen. And that's when the situation's like, this is fucked up, but this guy sounds like, from what's been reported, a really manipulative fucking sociopath, but he's specifically going after people who he knows are not going to be in a position to call him out if they figure out what's going on, because they are at material risk if they do. And that is a person with no scruples having a very canny read of what the military's regulations allow him to get away with.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, this even without the adultery thing, this is a person who's obviously preying on people who are in vulnerable states, which is very like the great thing about prosecuting an officer is it's very easy to slap up what is it, conduct unbecoming.
Yeah, conduct unbecoming or failure to obey a direct order, or even if they decide not to hit you with a charge, you get a general officer memorandum of administrative reprimand, and if it's in your official file, then it's your career's fucked, basically.
Yeah, which is all like certainly not punishment enough for a man who has secret families all over the place, but like also at the same time, there's not a whole lot that you can really do about.
Yeah, I was going to say the problem that this guy has, if you want the really cynical read on the Army, is he's a civil affairs officer and he did it with Americans. If he did it with people, with women in all the countries he would deploy to as a CA guy or someone in the larger umbrella of special operations, he would absolutely get away with it. But they're American citizens or they live in America, and some of them are connected to the military. So, and they know the military system with regard, like you said, stuff like FRG or duty officers and things like that. So it was more of a, to use a vulgar expression, it was a case of shitting where you eat, if you will.
Yeah, and breaking off more than you can chew. Because let me tell you something. When you got like 5 women that you're bouncing between, when one of them finds out about the other, they're not going to be on your side. Like that's never just like, oh well these women will fight each other for me. No, that's immediately as soon as these women like, oh, this guy has been banging 4 other women and has secret families elsewhere. Yeah, we gotta. I
mean, this guy's got a squad size element of side pieces. Legitimately, the man's got a wife. More than a fire team. He's got a wife and 6 other partners.
Man, yeah, he could take a small building with that.
Exactly. I was going to say, he genuinely, it's like running a squad-sized element.
You wait for those kids to grow up a little bit. You got a couple stack teams in the waiting there. And
so that's another thing that's kind of fucked up too, is like hearing some of these details about, making up fake loss of a child and fake deployments, and just like it really does strike me as the behavior of a complete sociopath.
Yeah, he did like tell one of the women that he had a daughter that died to get sympathy points. So he is an insane person that should be fired into the flaming hole in the ocean. We should keep that flaming hole in the ocean going specifically to put people like this into it.
I also have to say, from looking at the photos, My man loves making soy faces in photos.
Does. This dude. I mean, he's incredible. Like, I just wonder like what it was like to serve with him. He's got Ranger scroll and everything too. Like he's in a lot of ways he has walked the walk. He's full on military guy, but he's still like stealing valor by saying that he has a silver star. Who the fuck is that impressing?
Well, yeah, that's the thing too. Is the sort of the curse of the silver star guy, or the curse of the stolen valor guy, is never knowing when to give up.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy, like you said, the guy is a civil affairs officer. He was, based on the photos that I've seen, like you said, it looks like he's definitely deployed. Yeah, he's got a Ranger Battalion combat patch. He's master parachutist qualified. Like he's done the stuff in a lot of ways, but it strikes me that this guy absolutely has no scruples.
This is a guy who has a brain that would have been fantastic to be in the military, because to maintain something like this for the length of time that he did it requires an insane amount of planning, scheduling inside of your brain, the ability to, drop everything and make changes, or to respond to fresh input like immediately and in a correct and proper manner. Like, this is a person who like would have in a proper historical context should have been like leading armies against the Nazis or something, because he has the brain for it. But unfortunately, he's using it to just bang women across the country.
I was going to say, and this guy could probably teach the best class ever on establishing rapport with sources.
Absolutely.
But the problem is that, like you said, it's and I think that
using his powers for evil, man. Like, if you got a brain that can do this, stop being self-serving. Stop getting your dick wet and get America's
Sure,
dick
but
wet.
I mean, we must once again reiterate the official line of What a Hell of a Way to Die, which is that you are still more or less using your powers for evil if you join the military.
Sure.
So you should not even be in the military. Obviously, though, that having that power of persuasion and that ability to establish rapport, that ability to assess your situation, to immediately course correct, to understand your operational environment, if you will. This guy is very good at all the tenets of unconventional warfare. He's just a freak. And this is, I don't know, man.
This man is the Toyota Technical of people. Like, ever, available at all times, able to be used at any point, and highly upgradable or interchangeable if necessary. Perfect for asymmetrical warfare.
I guess the thing that's so weird to me, and maybe some of our listeners have found themselves in similar boats, is that it's kind of a challenge for me as a person to be like deliberately manipulative, or to be, what's the right word here, to like really fuck someone over and not feel guilty about it. Like, if someone's fucked me over before, or I know they're a piece of shit, or I know they're like abusive or just have a horrible temper, and I can manage them in a way where like it's a need to know basis kind of thing, and I just kind of keep them enough out of the loop that I get away with it and they don't know, that I solve the problem. That's one thing. But like, when someone's entering into an exchange with me in good faith as another fellow human being, like this, lying to someone about something so banal as like whether or not I had been deployed when I wasn't. Now, I need to reiterate, I have never done this, but lying about something as banal as like the dates of a deployment or the severity of PTSD symptoms, for example, would keep me up at night. Like, as a big fucking liar. You know what I mean? That shit would keep me up at night. So the idea of being able to do this and just sleep like a baby, it blows my fucking mind. I don't know how people are able to do this. And obviously, like, there's a word for it. It's called being a sociopath. But in a way, it is kind of funny to me, because I remember friends who have gone through some of like the secret squirrel intel gathering, source gathering programs that the military has as sort of umbrella programs. And these are skills that you need to have to be successful. And it's weird to me because it's like, it's a cliche to end all cliches, but when those skills are deployed, in the service of having side pieces, it's, people rightfully are like, that's disgusting, that's horrible, it's awful, that's amoral. But it's like, if you're doing this so that, because you're in the FBI and you're trying to convince some, depressed, Uzbek American teenager to plan a bombing so you can roll him up and get another fucking tick on your balance sheet, like, that's insane. It's just as amoral. And all right, people are gonna be like, you fucking prick, of course you have to make these big associations, blah blah. Why can't you just embrace this disgusting sleaze story and just do some tabloid shit about it? But like, that stuff does cross my mind, and it's my job to overthink things. So if you don't like it, sorry.
We have a podcast specifically to overthink our shit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you don't like this, you are probably listening to the wrong podcast.
You are 45 minutes into a show that you should have turned off a while ago. Well, welcome to the first episode of the show you're listening to.
Yeah, I was going to say, welcome to What a Hell of a Way to Die, a show that's never been done before. And it has not been happening for the last almost 5 years. In fact...
we like to take these funny stories and make you sad about them.
That's what we do, day in and day out. So, yeah, man, I mean, I think reading this stuff... Let me ask, in the last couple of minutes before we play the bonus, what is the most fucked up adultery story you can relate, as long as you're not going to incriminate someone?
Deployment is constant adultery, but like, that's kind of expected. Like, you're talking about being prosecuted based on your command and everything. There's a lot of times when fraternization or relationships within command structures are kind of looked over, either because the people in it have specifically gone to the commander and said, hey, like in Iraq, one of them, I'm a staff sergeant, I'm in a relationship with the specialist, we're in the same unit, but we're in different, command structures, we have different jobs, I do not have any sway over the specialist, militarily wise, other than I'm a staff sergeant. And they're like, yeah, they're also National Guard unit, so it didn't really matter, because once they got home, you do whatever because you're civilians. But I mean, I'm I'm fairly sure that like from everything that I've heard about DC mill Twitter is it's basically just one gigantic fuckfest.
Yes,
which is perfectly fine. I am not casting stones against that. Like if you and all of your buddies at Langley get together and everybody's cool with doing a key party or whatever, fucking knock yourselves out. I don't give a shit.
The thing that I want to say though, for me at least, was instead of it being like the weird, sad stories, which I've heard some of, I think the one that was the funniest for me was there was this captain who worked in the brigade, like S3 shop, I think, when I was in Korea, and he had been a company commander, so it was kind of weird for him to be an assistant S3 brigade. Like normally, I mean, I guess perhaps it's not that weird, but it was one of those things where it's like this guy had been in Korea a long time, and I mentioned his name once, and someone's like, "Yeah, that fucking guy," and I was like, "Well, what's up?" And they're like, "Yeah, you don't want to know." And what I later discovered from talking to NCOs who knew Korea very well, because in Korea, you could extend your assignment in Korea up to 3 years. I think it was called the assignment incentive program. You could get extra pay. Now, Korea is really restrictive, or was really restrictive, and it sucked in terms of just being authoritarian and you were always in the field. But there was a lot of perks that came along with it in terms of just like Korea is a fun place to party. It absolutely is.
People, soldiers that I talk to that do Korea, either they absolutely love it or they absolutely hate it. There's very little in between.
I hated my job, and I loved the time I had free being there. It was the most fun I had. I had the worst work experience of any unit I've ever been in the Army, and the absolute best time I had in my free time. But the point I'm trying to make is that the joke was the assignment incentive program also got referred to as the Avoid Iraq program, because you could extend in Korea for 3 years, and it's like, well, it's better than going back to, especially if you were mech, you were going to go back to fucking Hood or whatever and get deployed to Iraq and get your dick shot off. So there was that. Apparently this captain, while he was a company commander, was a geographical bachelor, which means his spouse was back in the US and he was in Korea, and but he had extended, but he didn't bring his spouse. He's just like, no, it's okay. I'm just going to stay a geographical bachelor. But if you're a geographical bachelor, you're not able to live off post, even if you've extended your tour in Korea. Like if you have dependents, you can, but you can't if you're single, like, your physical presence in country is single.
Sure.
So what my man did was he basically didn't tell his wife back in the US how much money he was getting paid BAH for them. He was paying whatever their mortgage was, but he was keeping the rest of the money, and he was renting a fuck pad in Dongducheon that he'd found, because you can't do this. Like, you have to do a lease through the housing office. They have to clear you. But what he did was, because he was out with guys drinking in like the hostess bars and stuff, he, through a person who knew a person who knew a person, found a Korean landlord who's like, yeah, I'll let you rent, whatever, pay cash, however. And so what he was doing was he had his bachelor officer quarters on post, but he was secretly renting a fuck pad in Dongducheon, both for bringing hostess bar girls home and also like to have swingers parties and things along those lines. And somehow this web eventually unraveled. And of course he got slapped hard and his career was ruined, but he was a prior service guy who had he'd been enlisted and then became an officer. And I've got to tell you, prior service guys know the shady things you can get away with in the military, especially when you're an officer, whereas people who've only ever been officers are often such like virgin Boy Scouts, and I'm saying this knowing I was one, that they don't realize what you can get away with. Now, it's not as insane as the commander, the brigade commander of the 173rd Airborne, who strong-armed his wife into a double proxy divorce through the state of Montana so he could marry his Iraqi Kurdish interpreter and supply her family with like $350,000 worth of Roshan phone minutes. And fake doing like TDY training in theater so he could take his interpreter with him to like go have a fuck party somewhere in Qatar or in Bahrain or somewhere in theater. I think he took her to maybe Kyrgyzstan or Uzbekistan or something like that. But anyway, this huge web of deceit of him, because he had a hot interpreter and he married her. And he wound up only getting reduced in rank 1 rank and being allowed to retire with his pension, because his dad was a 4-star and his dad showed up to every one of like the court-martial meetings and stuff. So in his fucking dress uniform. So yes, this is a story that everyone who has ever been in the Army has heard of, something like this going down. And ultimately, the thing that's wild is that brigade commander from the 173rd and that captain, the thing that really nailed them, because, all right, the misuse of funds for the brigade commander, like, yeah, that's pretty fucked up, and like you could get nailed hard for that. But the other captain, like violating the procedure with, fucking the housing office, not really that big of a deal. The thing they got nailed to the wall on was adultery. And once again, I'm telling you, like, it does not prevent this sleazy behavior. It just makes it super fucking underground. And this is the kind of thing that results. Funny story, but also extremely like Jody story in a way. And guess what, taxpayers? You are subsidizing it every time. Captain Grubbs or whatever his name was, fucking Dong Duchan, was bringing people over to have like a boom room in his fucking private apartment. You, in fact, were subsidizing it because his basic allowance for housing was, in fact, a tax-free entitlement through the military. So you know what? Your kids don't have erasers on their pencils in school because this guy needed to fuck. And if that's not America, I don't know what is.
I mean, look, they're obviously these people are these are insane people and they should be punished for what they've done. But also, it's very funny to watch somebody misappropriate government funds for their own. It's not funny when it's like a vice president, because then it's just like, oh, people are dying for you. But like when it's somebody, like, I always appreciated the dudes in Iraq who were like all the majors and shit who were just constantly buying rugs and sending them home, and then like having their spouses or having their friends like sell them at home because they could get like 5 times as much for like handmade in Iraq shit that gets sent back home. I appreciate the side hustles. I always appreciate somebody who's just like, hey, I could use this to my advantage. But when you're taking away from other people, that's when it's a problem. There's nothing wrong, like when you're sending a Connex overseas, or you're sending, and you're just, or like us, we would go on training all the time, send Connexes. Hey, throw some shit, throw some chairs in there, throw your camp chairs in there, throw like a coffee maker, throw all the creature comforts, because it's going to be shipped for free, and that's okay. It'll all be there. The Tricon will get there. We'll open it up. We'll have everything that we need, and nobody has to pay for or concern themselves with, bringing the stuff over on the airplane. Or that's fine. But man, when you see government waste in a way that's just like, but that's my shit that you're fucking with, then it's a problem. So yeah, taxpayers. I hope you enjoyed the fuck pad that you never got to enjoy, or maybe you
never got to fuck in, or maybe you did. Maybe you did. The thing that I would say too is, to me, I agree with you that I have obviously in my own mind a very zero tolerance kind of mentality in my own conduct for doing shady shit, mostly because in my life I have found that when I try to transgress, I am immediately punished by circumstance, or I feel incredibly guilty until I'm punished somehow. So maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's just easier for me to just live my life in a way where I'm just on the straight and narrow one way or the other, and it's fine. It may not work for you, works for me, no big deal. That being said, so obviously, like, there's frustration when you see shit and you get mad and you're like, how can you be so venal and etc. But also, someone defrauding the military for dumb shit and exploiting a loophole is fucking hilarious. It's always hilarious. It's always incredibly funny when someone, because invariably 2 things happen. Number one, it's like, it's so obvious out there kind of behavior that you're like, surely you could have done something less conspicuous, like the army captain who brought home a footlocker full of SERP funds in cash from Iraq in US dollars, and then like paid cash for a Hummer, not cash like a check, cash for a Hummer. Like, that's hilarious to me. Or, things along the lines of the other conundrum is people fall into the stolen valor conundrum, and they give themselves the Medal of Honor when they could just give themselves a Bronze Star with valor and no one would ever check.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, they set their sights too high on what they can accomplish, and thus you have the conundrum of the thing that I have talked about so many times on this podcast that all of you know what I'm going to say, which is, because I still laugh about this forever and ever, that the fucking supply support activity yard at Fob Sharana in 2009 ordered 2 shipping containers full of big screen TVs that were an unlocked expendable item NSN through the supply system, and we're going to bring them home and sell them for a profit. But then they got an order midway through the deployment, or towards the end of the deployment, that 90% of our shipping containers were going to be converted into theater purchased equipment. And so we could only bring home 2 containers per fucking company. So they had to suddenly offload 2 whole 20-footers full of TVs. That to me is fucking hilarious. It's so goddamn funny. I can't even begin.
There should be that's a movie of some kind. This is what we need. We need, like a funny movie about the Iraq War and Afghanistan War, just like something that is, wholesome, but also just like all the shit that like everybody did to try and make money. There should be like maybe a TV show we'll bring back Enlisted, but it's just based in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's just like, here's how I'm defrauding the government in a funny way to enrich myself in whatever way possible.
Yeah, there was a book called Fobbit, but I didn't like it at all. I won't get into it, but it attempts to be that way. Wasn't my thing. That being said, I agree with you. A satire, a Buffalo Soldier style story about the war in Afghanistan would make me laugh a lot. However, maybe that's not for you. One thing that should be for you, though, is this week's bonus episode, which is me and Milo Edwards, where we did a reverse Britanology. We called it Americaology, in which I both explain how we celebrate the 4th of July to Milo, and then I subject him to an Army Spouse blog listicle from military.com about extra patriotic ways to celebrate the 4th of July, and his brain fucking explodes. So if that sounds interesting, let me play you a little preview. And if you like it, on the $5 tier on the Patreon, you can get it. And every other bonus episode we have ever done is on that tier all the way back to 2016. So if you like it, there's plenty more where that came from.
Independence Day is supposed to be about tradition. Good old John Adams thought the day ought to be celebrated with, quote, pomp and parade with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, unquote. At military.com's Spouse Buzz, we are all about the traditional fireworks parades and adorable children reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, which is not creepy at all. But what can you do to give this usual stuff a little twist? What is something that can juice up your usual patriotism? If you are celebrating solo while your service member is deployed...
Well, that just sounds like they're jacking off on the 4th of July. That's how I'll be celebrating, fucking rubbing one out.
Yeah, this year I want to make it a little bit different. I want to spice it up. I'm going to sit on my hand for 30 minutes and then jack off with the flag.
I'm looking to get railed by Jody this 4th of July
I was
weekend.
going to say, if you're celebrating solo while your service member is deployed, check out Rebecca Sanderlin's list here, which to me... if 1 through 10 is not get railed by Jody, then she did not make the correct list. All right. Point number 1. Make a patriotic playlist.
Oh.
We have the most unsingable national...
Born in the USA. Fortunate son.
Wait until the next paragraph.
Okay.
No, I'm saying that because literally...
Oh, no!
One of the songs you mentioned is on there.
No, fuck off.
We have the most unsingable national anthem in the entire world, unless, of course, Madison Rising is singing it.
I don't know God Save the Queen and give it a run for its money.
I don't know who Madison Rising is, but with a name like that, they're probably a Nazi. But why stop there? Put together a list from the Great American Songbook. My Country 'Tis of Thee. Hold on. My Country 'Tis of Thee is literally reskinned God Save the Queen, just in case you didn't know that. Oh, Shenandoah, I don't actually know that one. Or just a lot of songs make you feel all American. Born in the USA, a song about how you get fucked over in Vietnam. Sweet Home Alabama, okay, but it's kind of a song about how the South is bad, but I fucking like it here. American Pie, a song about the Big Bopper dying in a plane crash.
I mean, what could be more American than that?
Yeah, well, I mean... every generation has to have its traumatic aviation event to bring things together.
That is right.
Or maybe you could get all tricky and feature songs that mention the colors red, white, or blue. Cue up your favorite copy of Schoolhouse Rock and drive around with your windows open. If you do this, everyone will hate you. But you can do this.
You can theoretically do that, yeah. You might get murdered, but
So I noticed you were a little bit uncomfortable with the thing about the Pledge of Allegiance, too.
Man, that weirds Brits out so much.
It's fucking weird, isn't it?
It's really fucking weird. Because, I mean, I think, there are, and this is kind of a recent thing, but there are now psychos in the sort of front bench of the Conservative Party who would like British kids to do shit like this, and it's some of the stuff that puts the British electorate off the most. It's like you can only really sell it to the most insane, like, fash people in this country, and it's always like wild to me whenever you remember that in America this is like completely normal.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Pledge of Allegiance, as I understand it, is relatively, I mean, in the history of the United States, relatively recent. It wasn't created until like the tail end of the 19th century.
Right.
I think it became more of a thing around the U.S. around when, because you have to understand that in the run up to America joining World War I, it was actually incredibly unpopular. And the U.S. government, in order to sort of convince people it was a good idea, mounted this huge propaganda assault and also put anti-war activists and anti-war politicians in prison under the Alien and Sedition Acts. These are acts that had existed before, but they basically decided to enforce them and put people in prison. In fact, if you're not familiar with the story of Eugene Debs, he was a socialist candidate for president in the 1916 presidential election. I'm pretty sure he was in prison. He got like 1 million votes from prison. So this kind of thing became a big deal. And then I want to say in the 50s, during McCarthyism, they added the under God bit into the Pledge of Allegiance. It wasn't in the original draft of the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right. Okay.
So it used to be, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It didn't say one nation under God with liberty and indivisible with liberty and justice for all. It's fucking weird. And like,
that's that separation of church and state that you guys have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
They're real separate over there.
Same thing with it putting in God we trust on money. That wasn't a thing until the 20th century, but some psychos got involved and decided that our money had to fight communism with God.
This is a big thing with like weird fast traditions, is they're all like weirdly recent. Like they kind of like, people will try and portray that it's been this way since the mists of time, and it's invariably like, oh no, we started doing this in the 50s for some reason, and no, we didn't do it before that.
Yeah. I guess it was the Pledge of Allegiance was adopted by Congress during World War II and mandated across the U.S., and it's just stuck. Like, I know it by heart because I had to say it every fucking day in school, and it's really stupid.
Yeah.
And you have to stand and you just put your hand on your heart. And it's just it is weird when you think about it. Like, much like kids having active shooter drills in preschool in America, like, it's a thing that's just sort of so part of the milieu there that, like, you just forget that it's weird. So, I'm always interested when British people react to this because, it is, I'm not going to defend it at all. It's psycho. Yeah.
It's very weird. I don't know. And that was always like anything that was even like vaguely in that, like, I went to a bit of a hoity-toity school for a while, and like anything that was like, I mean, they didn't really make us do any stuff that was like particularly patriotic, but they used to make us do stuff that was like weirdly like pompously religious, and I used to hate all of that shit. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not sure how I would have coped.
It's very, very strange. And I mean, I don't know if you do it in private schools or not in America. I just don't know. But I sort of think you do anyway, because
you
like,
use that time to piss on each other instead.
Yeah, because it's so ingrained that like schools have to do this, so kids are American, and it's very weird.
Yeah, you wouldn't want kids turning out to be, communist.
So the point number 2, a road trip to the National Mall. If you're stationed anywhere near Washington, D.C.,
I was going to say, no good if you live in fucking Alaska.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Force your kids on like a 9-day drive to get down to the National Mall. Have you been to D.C.?
No.
No, okay. So do you know what I mean? What they mean by the National Mall?
Yeah, it's like by the Washington Monument, right?
Yeah. Enormous
I've seen
field of stuff. Lots of museums around there too. It's hot, it's crowded, it's
not
dusty.
Not confused with the Mall of America.
Yeah, which
would be a much more appropriate site to celebrate.
Yeah, realistically,
in my opinion.
which is like outside of Minneapolis, I think. There's something about rocket's red glare behind the Washington Memorial with a plane taking off from Reagan Airport during the show that is ultra American. Added bonus, every time
I love that they've done that all one word.
Oh, I mean, this was clearly written for nothing but a military spouse
ultra American
audience, so it's just going to be the unfiltered raw shit. It's not been stepped on at all. Added bonus, every time you hear someone talk about 250,000 people, you can remind your kids that that's how many people were on the mall during fireworks.
And it's also how many people attended Ronnie Cray's funeral, where the security was organized by Dave Courtney.
I can't, having been in places with that large of a concentration of people at like St. Patrick's Day in Savannah one year, I wouldn't want to be, especially with kids, going to a place with 250,000 people, but
no,
I'm built different.
Yeah.
Point number 3, be on a plane during the fireworks. Because if you're headed out of town anyway, why not book your flight to take off at around 9:30 from DCA, which is Dulles, I believe. No, that's Reagan National. Sit on the right side of the plane and witness the fireworks.
This is absolutely deranged.
I know.
Who would do this?
Psychos.
Like,
But-
what? Fireworks are boring anyway. Who gives a fuck?
Apparently, if fireworks are too boring for you and your kids, you can get on a plane and fly during the fireworks show, so you think you're getting shot at by anti-aircraft guns.
Yeah, great. Love that.
And I feel like there would be a lot of crossover with Blitz dads in Britain who would also appreciate this.
Why not charter your own plane to look at the fireworks? And hey, if you don't have time to take a full course of flying lessons before the 4th of July, don't worry. You don't need to learn how to land. There's a flying school in Florida, which...
It says, note to self, find out which other cities I can fly out of during fireworks unless that's dangerous, and then don't do it. Okay.
Great. Cool. I presume the aviation authorities would probably not allow a plane to fly somewhere that was dangerous.
They probably set up a restricted operating zone, like restricted airspace around where it's going to be, so that planes don't, in fact, fly over.
I mean, I would imagine that the fireworks go nowhere near that high anyway.
Well, yeah, it depends on if they're takeoff and landing and stuff like that is one thing. But yeah, if they're just overflight, no, they're nowhere close. Yeah.
Yeah.
Point number 4, do a red, white, and blue potluck. Yes, I know potlucks and barbecues are cliche for Independence Day, but I'm thinking there's no coincidence that strawberries and blueberries come into season just in time for the 4th of July.
No, it's a coincidence.
Yeah,
I'm afraid.
I think it might actually be a coincidence. Put a twist on the traditional military potluck by requesting that everyone bring only red, white, or blue food. You know you want to indulge all those crafty things on Pinterest. I personally am dying to wrap Twizzlers in blue starred ribbon, but that's just because I have a thing for Twizzlers. Hopefully someone else will bring red meat.
Okay, this person is going to get salmonella at some point, and it's not a moment too soon, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping it was going to be something more deranged than just wrapping Twizzlers in ribbon.
Why are all the world's biggest psychos on Pinterest?
That is a good question, isn't it?
I feel like it's a bit like I feel about it the same way I feel about sort of Germans. Who I find like whenever I spend time in Germany, like the Germans are sort of superficially just like very chill and liberal, but are also always feel like they're kind of like one bad Tuesday away from like, right, that's it, we're bringing the Nazi party back.
Yeah.
And I feel like Pinterest is the same way. Like everyone on there is they're like the most world's like highly strung mums who are like, you know, today it's all like really intricate cupcake designs, but tomorrow it could be like, I've beheaded my neighbor and here's the video. Do you know what I mean?
Anyway, thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we will speak to you next week.
Take care.